Hi, I'm Camilla. I spent nearly $10,000 planning my parents' 40th anniversary trip. Every room, every meal, every leaf in that Vermont inn was chosen by me. But then, just a day before the train left, I got a text. Don't come, we're full. They gave my seat to my sister's friend. No warning, no apology. The next day, they posted smiling photos with her, captioned, finally complete. And while they toasted at the table I paid for, I sat alone with a ticket that still had my name on it. What do you do when your own family edits you out of the story? And what happens when the silence finally ends? I had triple-checked everything: the printouts, the train tickets, the dinner reservation confirmations, all laid out on the coffee table like some kind of sacred offering. 2 fireplace suites at the Berkshire Inn. Vineyard views. A candlelit dinner at the exact restaurant my parents had gone to 40 years ago on their honeymoon. Down to the dessert, a maple creme brulee I found through an archived menu online. I even upgraded their train ride to first class. I'd stay coach. I didn't mind. I'd spent 6 weeks threading every detail together, staying up late between deadlines at work, adjusting my PTO around this trip. Nearly $10,000 of savings, gone without a second thought. I told myself it was worth it. They deserved to be celebrated. The bouquet would arrive at their dinner table around 7 p.m. Fresh asters and goldenrod, tied with a ribbon the same color as Mom's old cardigan. The place cards were handwritten by me, just a quiet touch. I didn't expect applause. I just wanted them to smile, and maybe, for once, look at me not as the stable one, but as someone who still loved them enough to try. It was late morning in Bend, Oregon, the sun washing through the window, painting everything a sleepy amber. I poured myself coffee I didn't need, just something warm to hold as I walked through my checklist one last time. The train would leave in 6 hours. I had time. I glanced down at my phone, halfway expecting a "can't wait" text from Mom or a thumbs-up emoji from Seraphine. Nothing. Not that I needed it, but it would have been nice. Instead, I got a message. Just 3 lines. Camilla, don't come. We're full. Everything's handled. I stared at the screen, blinked, then read it again, slower, as if comprehension worked like a dimmer switch. Don't come. We're full. Everything's handled. My fingers hovered over the screen. Surely this was a mistake, a misfire. She meant something else. Or maybe it was a joke, some awkward way of saying, "Take a break, you've done enough." I waited for a follow-up. There wasn't one. I sat down on the edge of the couch, not quite trusting my legs to hold me up. My coffee cooled in my hands, untouched. My suitcase sat by the door, zipped, ready. Just like me. I didn't cry, not right away. That would have felt too dramatic, too self-centered, something Mom always warned against when I was little. "Don't make things about you," she'd say if I ever looked disappointed at a birthday where Seraphine got more attention. But this time, I wasn't even part of the picture. I scrolled back up and read the message again. The words hadn't changed, but they hit harder the second time around. They were full. Full of what? Gratitude? Space? Aria? I exhaled, slow and deliberate. My chest felt too tight, like I'd been holding my breath for years, and only now realized it. The planner in my lap still had the sticky note. Berkshire Inn, Oct. 7-9. Their favorite. I'd circled the dates like a school kid counting down to a field trip. But this wasn't a trip anymore. It was a lie wrapped in hotel linens and labeled as handled. I opened my photo folder, saw the screenshots of emails, the floral invoice, the train receipt with my name. All that time, all that care. Gone. I still didn't call, didn't text back. What was there to say? What do you tell your family when they've already decided you're replaceable? The train ticket remained on the counter, half folded. My name printed clearly across the top. Reserved. Confirmed. I looked at it for a long time. The ink didn't fade, but something in me did. Outside, the wind picked up. Leaves rustled in that dry, fluttery way they do in early fall. a quiet applause that somehow made everything feel more hollow. I sat there until dusk, watching the light shift across my living room floor, watching the hands of the clock turn with no concern for who was included and who wasn't. The bag by the door didn't move. Neither did I. But something in my chest did. A crack I couldn't ignore. Not this time. Because somewhere out there, my parents were getting ready for a celebration I created, in a room I chose, at a table I paid for. And someone else, someone who hadn't lifted a finger, was sitting in my seat. The clock on my wall ticked into late afternoon, and the apartment had grown colder, though I hadn't touched the thermostat. The suitcase was still there, upright by the door, like it didn't get the message. I hadn't moved from the couch since that text. The silence had done a better job than any scream ever could. I didn't cry, but I hadn't blinked much either. I was halfway into making myself stand up, maybe pour another cup of that now bitter coffee, when my phone vibrated. Not a call, not a message. Instagram. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the notification. Then I tapped. The boomerang loaded instantly. A loop of 3 women waving at a train platform draped in orange and red leaves. My mother, Seraphine, and Aria. Aria. She was front and center, holding a latte in one hand and grinning like she belonged there. I could see the edge of the train behind them, the same one I'd spent 2 hours booking to match their original honeymoon route. My name wasn't tagged. The caption underneath hit harder than the text from Mom. Family trip, finally complete. That line landed like a slap. Not because it was cruel. No, it was worse than that. It was intentional. A declaration. A rewriting. I sat back, phone still in hand, breath trapped somewhere behind my ribs. They didn't even try to hide it. No, wish you were here, or we miss you. Just complete. Whole. Without me. Aria looked like she'd always been part of the family. You'd never guess she once used my toothbrush without asking, while filming some throwaway TikTok in my bathroom. You'd never guess she'd lied to my face about just being friends with the man I was set to marry. I remembered that night like it was stitched into my skin. I had just gotten back from a late client meeting. Aria was in the kitchen, laughing with him. Too comfortable, too familiar. When I finally asked, they called me insecure. Don't be dramatic, Camila. We're just close. 2 weeks later, I found her necklace in his glove box. I hadn't told my family. Not because I wanted to protect Aria, but because I already knew what they'd say. That I was overreacting. That I needed to learn to let things go. That maybe it was just a misunderstanding. No one ever said that to Seraphine when she lost it over an overcooked turkey. And now, here she was. Aria. Front and center in the photo that should have had me in it. With my mom's arm around her shoulder, like she'd been born into the family instead of sliding her way into it like spilled wine into carpet. I scrolled through the rest of the pictures. One of Aria and Seraphine clinking glasses. Another of Vera smiling, with a floral arrangement in the background. The same bouquet I had special ordered. Down to the asters. Not one picture of me. Not even a hint I existed. I wanted to say something. To text Seraphine, to call Mom, to scream. But I didn't. I just stared at the screen, at all these people I loved. Laughing, posing, building memories with someone who had built nothing for them. No, not nothing. She'd built herself a place. Out of my silence. Out of my generosity. Out of my damn seat. My thumb hovered over the screen again. I could have left a comment. Could have made a scene. But that wasn't me. That was never me. Instead, I held the phone for another moment, watching Aria's laughter loop over and over like a bad joke you hear too many times. Then I closed the app and without ceremony deleted it from my phone. Not to punish anyone, not even to disconnect. Just to protect whatever pieces of me I still had left from being chipped away by people who didn't notice I was breaking. The apartment grew darker as the sun dipped lower. I didn't turn on the lights. I reached for my planner on the coffee table, flipped to the trip page. There, in looping penmanship, I had once written, "Their favorite season, make it unforgettable." I scratched it out slowly, one line at a time, until it was unreadable. Then I wrote underneath it, "They didn't forget me, they replaced me." I woke up the next morning to a beam of sunlight cutting across the rug, my neck stiff from sleeping on the couch. I hadn't meant to fall asleep there. I just never made it to bed. The weight of the silence from last night was still heavy in the room, and my body ached in that specific way that comes from being both emotionally hollow and physically numb. I shuffled to the kitchen, made coffee mostly out of habit, and sat down at the counter. My phone was still off, face down beside the sink, but my laptop was open. I didn't plan on checking anything, but my fingers moved anyway, opening up the browser before I could talk myself out of it. And there it was. Tagged photos. Dozens of them. At first, I scrolled past quickly, thinking maybe it would sting less that way, but my eyes kept catching details I couldn't ignore. The fireplace suite, exactly the one I paid extra for. The soft amber lighting from the restaurant I handpicked. The place cards. My handwriting still visible in one of the shots, slanted cursive on cream cardstock. And there, front and center, Aria again, laughing beside Vera like they shared inside jokes, holding up a glass of champagne at the very table I reserved, toasting with my mother and Seraphine like this trip had been hers all along. Her hand rested lightly on Vera's shoulder in one shot, like she belonged there. No caption, no tag, not one mention of my name. I kept scrolling, stopping when I saw the bouquet in the background. The one I chose, asters and goldenrod, tied with the same sage green ribbon I remembered Mom once said, reminded her of her wedding dress. That little comment she made months ago over a lukewarm brunch was something I'd filed away and used to plan this whole celebration. They didn't even try to hide it. They took everything I built and painted over it with someone else's brush. I closed the browser, stood up, and walked to the window. My apartment was quiet, the leaves outside slowly drifting down in their final dance before winter. As I stood there, the past came rushing in like a slow leak through cracked walls. I was 26 when I got engaged. He was charming in that lazy kind of way, never too ambitious, but always affectionate enough to make you question your own instincts. Aria and I had been friends then, or at least I thought we were. She had a way of making herself small around me, harmless, supportive. But one night, I came home early and found her laughing on my porch with him. Their eyes met too quickly. She left her scarf on his chair. When I asked, she brushed it off like I was being too intense. And when it finally unraveled, when I saw the texts, the late-night calls, she didn't apologize. She shrugged and said, "Things happen." The family's response: "Don't dwell, Camila. That kind of thing ruins people." No one told her she was the one who caused the ruin. Now she was back. Different context, same script. My phone buzzed, pulling me back to the present. A notification from Seraphine's page. I opened it. "So grateful to have been able to make this weekend happen for Mom and Dad, Stitcher's Family Matters." The photo attached was the dinner scene again. My table, my plan, her credit. My jaw clenched so tight it ached. They'd written me out like I was a placeholder. I stared at that picture, at Seraphine's wide smile and perfectly manicured hands resting beside the bouquet I paid for. I didn't text her. I didn't comment. There wasn't a single word I could say that wouldn't be twisted, minimized, or dismissed. Instead, I shut the app and walked to my suitcase, still untouched by the door. I unzipped it slowly, not to unpack, but just to hear the sound. Something grounded, something real. My planner sat on top, right where I'd placed it days ago. I opened to the page I had decorated with post-it notes and hand-drawn hearts. There was the itinerary, the meal plan, the spa reservations, all of it. My labor in ink. I flipped to the final page and picked up a pen. In a blank space, I wrote, "They used everything but my name." Then I closed it and pressed the planner back into the suitcase. I didn't make coffee this time. I didn't need to sit down. I just stood there, surrounded by the wreckage of my own good intentions, and finally let my breath go. The next morning, I didn't scroll. I didn't refresh. I didn't even look at my phone. I just packed a single overnight bag, grabbed my coat, and headed for the station. The train ride to Stowe took most of the day. I stared out the window as the scenery shifted from quiet suburbs to fiery mountainsides, dotted with red barns and pumpkin stands. I didn't bring headphones. I didn't need distractions. I had a reason to be there, even if I was the only one who believed it. By the time I stepped off the train, the sun had dipped low, casting long gold shadows across the gravel path. The air was crisp, sharper than I remembered. Vermont in October always had that bite. I didn't take a cab. I walked the half-mile stretch to the resort through a winding path lined with sugar maples, their leaves like a kaleidoscope under my boots. With every step, I thought, "This is mine. I made this happen." As I neared the main courtyard, I could already hear laughter, familiar voices echoing from the garden patio I'd reserved. I paused behind a row of hedges, just long enough to take it in. Vera sipping wine with her hand on Aria's arm, Seraphine posing with a cocktail, staff floating by with trays of appetizers. No one noticed me. I moved quietly toward the entrance, adjusting the strap on my shoulder bag. I wasn't dressed for a party. Slacks, a navy blouse, a light scarf. I hadn't planned to be seen. I just needed to see. Just as I stepped into the lobby, a man in a vest and name tag stopped me with a friendly nod. "You with the catering team?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" "The banquet group. You're a late arrival?" It took everything in me not to flinch. I smiled, small and tight. "No, I'm not staff." "Oh, sorry," he said, stepping aside. I walked past without correcting him. What was the point? I had bought the damn tableware. They didn't know me then. They didn't know me now. As I rounded the corner to the East Wing entrance, a familiar figure blocked the doorway, Vera. She wasn't smiling. She looked tired, like the kind of tired that wasn't from walking too far, but from trying too hard to maintain control. Her eyes scanned me, then flicked to my bag. "Camila," I stopped, hands loose at my sides. "I told you not to come," she said, voice calm but flat. "We agreed." "No," I replied. "You decided. I was never asked." She let out a shallow sigh and stepped in closer, her voice dropping. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. This weekend isn't about you." I held her gaze. "That's the part you've always misunderstood. It never was." Her jaw tensed. "Please don't embarrass the family. We're trying to enjoy this." I looked past her into the dining room, where Aria twirled her wine glass, laughing at something Seraphine whispered. The lighting was soft, warm, exactly how I envisioned it when I booked the space. My mother's favorite shade of gold ran across the tablecloths. The centerpieces bloomed just as ordered. They were enjoying it all right. Every detail, every piece of it that came from me. I didn't argue. I didn't push past her. I just nodded once, stepped back, and turned around. The walk down the hill felt longer than I remembered. The trees whispered, swaying as if they knew what had just happened, but had no comfort left to offer. My boots crunched over the leaves I'd hoped to walk through with them. Not as a guest, as a daughter. Back at the station, the bench was empty. I sat, pulled out my phone, and finally turned it on. Notifications flooded in. Texts, emails, group messages, and at the top, a new Instagram post. A photo of Vera and Aria, arms linked, smiles wide. The caption read, "Love this family more than anything." I didn't blink. I didn't scroll. I whispered, to no one but myself, "They chose her. I choose me." By the time I got back to my apartment, the sky had shifted from amber to charcoal. I didn't bother turning on the lights. I left my overnight bag by the door, untouched, and dropped my coat on the chair without a second glance. The quiet in the room didn't feel peaceful. It felt like a reminder of what I saw, what I heard, and what I was no longer willing to accept. I stood at the kitchen sink, pouring water into the kettle like it mattered, like it might steady my hands. Outside, the wind rattled the windows just enough to feel personal. I sat down at the table, sipping tea I didn't want, and stared at the blank space across from me. A seat. Always a seat. Always one I never got. It was around 9 p.m. when my phone buzzed on the counter. I ignored it at first. Then another came, and another. Eventually, I walked over and picked it up, expecting maybe a text from Seraphine, half-hearted and hours too late. Instead, it was a message from my cousin Gina. "Hey, have you seen this?" There was a link, a TikTok. I paused. My thumb hovered. Then I tapped. It was a short video. Aria filming herself, surprise, surprise, giving a behind-the-scenes tour of the dinner setup. Vera could be heard off-camera, sharp but careless. "Who told her to book it anyway? She's always doing too much." The screen went still. My ears didn't. The clip looped. Once. Twice. "She's always doing too much." That wasn't just a sentence. That was the way my mother has defined me for years. The unspoken critique behind every strained smile and guilt-laced thank you. It was never gratitude. It was toleration, thinly veiled. And now it wasn't veiled at all. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone like in the movies. I just sat down slowly, placed it on the table, and stared at it like it owed me something. Maybe it did. The comments were already piling in beneath the video. Yikes! Did she just say that about her own daughter? This woman sounds cold. No wonder Camilla didn't show up. I didn't know these people, but they saw what I'd been swallowing for years in 10 seconds flat, and they didn't try to explain it away. They called it what it was. I didn't share it. I didn't repost. I let the algorithm do its thing. I sat in the eye of the storm and, for once, didn't flinch. An hour later, I opened my laptop and pulled up my emails. I drafted one to the hotel's event coordinator. "Hi, Nancy. Please transfer all remaining communication and coordination to the new point of contact listed below. I won't be participating further. Thank you, Camilla." Attached was Seraphine's email. If she wanted the spotlight, she could keep the logistics too. I hit send. I stared at the confirmation for a few seconds, then closed the laptop and leaned back. No one texted me. No apology followed. No call from Vera. No apology-laced paragraph from Seraphine. And I knew none was coming. But something was shifting. This time, the silence wasn't mine to hold. I looked around the apartment. Not searching, just noticing. The suitcase still by the door. The tea cooling beside me. My phone on the table, still vibrating occasionally with new likes, new shares, new strangers validating what I'd lived in secret. My eyes drifted to the planner I'd left on the counter. I reached for it, opened to the page that held the trip details, and carefully tore it out. Not in anger, just in finality. I folded the page once, then twice, and dropped it in the trash. They wanted a celebration without me. Now they had one, minus the glue that held it together. I poured the rest of my tea down the sink, rinsed the mug, and stood in the quiet that finally felt earned. I'd whispered my way through every slight, every omission, every moment I was erased. Not anymore. I warned them. Now I was done whispering. Morning light poured through my blinds, soft and gray, the kind of light that doesn't ask for attention, but insists on being noticed. I stirred from the couch again. Seems like that was my new place to sleep these days. The apartment was still, save for the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the heater kicking in. I hadn't made coffee yet. My laptop sat open on the dining table from the night before. I hadn't touched it since sending that final email to the hotel, cutting my name from every remaining connection to the event. As I padded barefoot toward the kitchen, my phone vibrated across the counter. First one buzz, then two, then five, back to back. I picked it up, my stomach already tightening. Missed calls, voicemails, group texts, Seraphine, Vera. Even a number I didn't recognize, Aria's assistant probably. Every message had the same frantic undercurrent. "There's an issue with the event insurance. Can you confirm the payment method? We need to talk, urgently." No one said hi. No one said, "Camilla, we're sorry." They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They were calling because the consequences of erasing me finally caught up to them. I poured myself a glass of water, leaned on the counter, and read through each message one by one. Every single one focused on logistics. Who signed the vendor contracts? Whose name was on the payment agreements? Who was listed on the liability release? Me. Of course it was me. I was the safety net, the default, the one who always handled the mess after the party ended. That's what they'd turned me into, an invisible custodian of their image. Not anymore. I opened my laptop, pulled up the template from my lawyer's office, a document we'd drafted months ago during an unrelated property dispute. I had nearly forgotten about it until now. The words were already there, clean and simple. To whom it may concern, effective immediately, I, Camila Reyes, relinquish all financial, legal, and organizational responsibility related to the 40th anniversary event held in Stowe, Vermont. Any continued use of my name, accounts, or correspondence for said event will be considered unauthorized and subject to legal review. Sincerely, CR. I attached it to a new email. Subject line: Formal withdrawal notice. No body text, no pleasantries. I typed in the recipients: Vera, Seraphine, the hotel manager, and the event insurance coordinator. CC'd my lawyer. Then I hit send. The silence that followed was immediate, like the quiet right after a thunderclap. I closed the laptop, turned off my phone, and stood in my kitchen, letting the moment settle. This wasn't petty. This wasn't about revenge. It was clarity. Finally, painfully earned. 20 minutes later, the house phone rang. The landline I rarely gave out. I let it ring twice, then picked up. Vera's voice came through, sharp and clipped. "I can't believe you're doing this to your own family." I didn't speak. I let the silence linger. She continued, "You're making a scene. You always do this. Just when things are going well, you find a way to ruin it." I exhaled, steady and slow. "No," I said. "You made the mess. I'm just stepping out of it." There was a beat of pause, just enough to feel her recalibrate. "Well," she snapped, "when this whole thing falls apart, don't come crying back." I smiled, not bitter, just tired. "I haven't come to you for anything in years, Vera. You just didn't notice." I hung up before she could respond. That was the last call I took that day. I spent the afternoon cleaning, not out of anger, but because clarity likes clean corners. I boxed up the leftover trip materials, the backup menu plans, the extra invitation cards I'd printed just in case someone unexpected came along. I labeled the box Archive, slid it into the hallway closet, and shut the door. I didn't need to see it again, but I didn't need to destroy it either. It happened. I gave, they took. Then I stopped. That night, I cooked a quiet dinner, read a chapter of a book I'd been putting off, and lit a candle I'd bought months ago but never used. The apartment smelled like pine and orange peel. Just before bed, I checked my inbox one last time. Nothing from Seraphine, no reply from Vera, no apology from anyone. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for one. It was Wednesday afternoon when the shift started. I had just returned from a short walk around the block, needing air after 2 days of dodging calls and setting legal boundaries. The leaves had begun to rot along the sidewalks, golden on top, brown and soggy underneath. They crunched and squished beneath my boots, much like my emotions. Soft, damp, but still layered with something dry and sharp. I was halfway through reheating a bowl of soup when a ping came from my laptop. A notification from a local Vermont business page I followed during the planning phase, mostly to track foliage reports and guest reviews at the inn. I clicked. It was a public post from the Berkshire Inn account, not from the front desk. From Nancy, the event coordinator I'd worked with for over a month. Gratitude post. Shout out to Camila Reyes, who worked tirelessly to plan last weekend's private event for the Reyes family. Every reservation, detail, and arrangement was coordinated by her with grace and clarity. It was an honor to collaborate with someone so thoughtful. The words didn't sting. They didn't make me tear up. They made me feel real, seen. Within minutes, the post began circulating. Former guests from the inn commented, resharing it with screenshots of Vera's dismissive video from the TikTok that still hadn't died down. Strangers weighed in. So Camilla was the planner and the one who got cut out? Yikes! This is the part of family stories no one wants to talk about. How easy it is to pretend someone never existed. And the most biting one of all, she didn't get forgotten, she got replaced. I didn't respond. I didn't click like. I simply sat down and watched the narrative unravel itself, knot by knot. By late evening, I decided it was time to finish what I'd started. I pulled out the manila envelope I'd prepared over the weekend, sealed and unaddressed until now. Inside, a full packet of itemized receipts, catering contracts, venue deposits, floral invoices, a printed guest list I drafted, and the seating chart they clearly ignored. On top, I placed a single note card, handwritten, no frills. I'm no longer the stand-in for a family that doesn't stand with me. I addressed it to the house I grew up in, not because I thought anyone would read it together, but because I wanted it to land where it began. Thursday morning, I walked it to the post office myself, mailed it certified, tracked it, let the silence travel in the form of proof. By Friday, I had 3 missed calls from Seraphine, 2 from Vera, and 1 voicemail from Aria's number, which I deleted without listening. Later that day, a mutual acquaintance tagged me in a live stream clip, Vera speaking at some women's brunch group about family unity and grace through challenges. I watched her lips twist into a rehearsed smile as someone leaned over and whispered in her ear mid-sentence. Her smile flickered, just for a second. I closed the video. No more commentary, no more conversations. I didn't owe anyone a version of the truth that had already spoken for itself. That night, after dinner, and 2 pages of reading I barely remembered, I walked to the bookshelf. The planner was there, beige cover, bent corner, the one I started this whole thing with. I flipped it open. There it was, a sticky note in blue ink. Planned surprise for Mom and Dad, Berkshire Inn. I took a pen from the jar, crossed out their names with 3 deliberate lines. Then I wrote beneath it, me. Saturday morning settled over the apartment like fog, quiet, stubborn, and impossible to ignore. I stood in the kitchen, stirring a pot of oatmeal I didn't want, my eyes unfocused, my mind elsewhere. The planner still sat on the table, page crossed out and rewritten, the ink still faintly wet. The doorbell rang once. I didn't answer. No one I wanted to hear from used that door. Later that afternoon, I was sorting through a basket of mail when a message buzzed in from Gina, the cousin who always seemed to know everything 2 days before everyone else. Cam, the text read, you need to see this, from the brunch. Attached was a short video clip. Vera standing at a podium, giving what looked like a speech to a local women's club. Neatly dressed, polished, her smile mechanical, voice clipped in that rehearsed way she used when she was trying to sound warm without giving anything away. She was always a bit distant, Vera was saying, hands folded loosely on the podium. You know how some children are, quiet, reserved. Seraphine took charge of most family things. She's always had a gift for organizing. I froze, played it again, slower. She was always a bit distant. There it was. I stared at the screen long after the video ended, my hand resting on the edge of the table to keep me upright. Distant. The word echoed, sharp and dismissive. She didn't say my name. She didn't need to. I walked to the bookshelf in the hallway closet and pulled down a photo album I hadn't opened in years. The spine cracked as I laid it flat on the table. Page after page of family photos, glossy and staged. In every one, I was either off to the side or cropped so tightly it looked like I'd wandered into someone else's frame. Easter brunch, Seraphine center stage, me in the background, half behind a vase. Birthday party at age 12, cake in front of Seraphine, my hand barely visible at the edge of the table. School awards? The certificate was mine, but the note underneath, "Thanks to Seraphine for helping her study." Invisible wasn't just a feeling, it was a strategy. I sat back, breath tight in my chest. I thought about all the times I'd taken the second shift at the diner in high school so Mom wouldn't have to cancel the cable. All the times I'd covered Seraphine's rent when her social media coaching business flopped. The times I'd shown up, fixed things, paid bills, remembered dates, and no one said anything. But Vera remembered to say I was distant. I walked to my desk and pulled open the bottom drawer. My old planning notebook was tucked underneath a stack of tax documents and expired coupons. I opened it and flipped to the page I knew would be there. A sticky note in the corner, pale yellow and curling at the edges. In my handwriting, the words, "Hope they'll finally be proud of me." I didn't hesitate. I pulled the note off, crumpled it in my fist, and walked it to the sink. The flame from the gas burner caught it fast, curling it into smoke and ash in less than 5 seconds. I watched it burn. Not in anger, in relief. I'd spent years thinking that if I just tried harder, planned better, was quieter, more responsible, more patient, maybe they'd notice. They did notice. They just chose someone else to celebrate. I turned back to my desk, pulled out a clean sheet from the back of the notebook, and wrote a single sentence across the top. They didn't forget me. They needed me silent. I paused, underlined it, then added, "That version of me is gone." I leaned back in my chair, breathing easier than I had in weeks. Later that evening, after dinner and a warm shower, I opened my laptop, typed in solo retreats in Vermont, filtered by price and availability. I chose a quiet inn in Brattleboro, wooden cabins, fire pits, no family packages. I clicked book now, just one guest. The train eased to a stop at the same small station where I'd stood a year ago, suitcase in hand, heart full of hope, only to be left behind. This time, there was no suitcase, just a canvas shoulder bag and a hardcover book I'd meant to read for months. I stepped down slowly, feet crunching over familiar gravel. The air in Stowe was just as crisp, the sugar maples still flaming red and gold like they had been that October morning. But this time, I wasn't looking for anyone. I wasn't waiting to be included. I was simply arriving. I didn't rush. I walked with quiet purpose through the town, past shops with flannel in the windows, and porch displays full of mums and hay bales. The smell of cinnamon hung in the air from a nearby bakery. A couple with matching scarves asked me where the bookstore was. I pointed them in the right direction without hesitation, smiling. My voice was calm. I didn't stutter or second guess. I knew exactly where I was and why I was here. I passed the inn where the celebration had happened last year. The lights glowed warm in the windows, soft shadows moving behind the curtains. For a moment, I stopped. Not to linger in pain, but to honor how far I'd come. Back then, I would have looked for them inside, peering through glass, wondering if they'd seen me. Now? I kept walking. The cafe across from the inn hadn't changed. Same green awnings, same flower boxes under the windows. I pushed the door open, the bell overhead jingling softly. There were only a few people inside, 2 older women chatting in the corner, a young man with headphones and a laptop. I chose a window seat, the one I'd imagined myself sitting in last year. The server smiled at me. "What can I get you?" "Chamomile tea," I said, "and no rush." She nodded and disappeared into the back. I set my book down on the table, but didn't open it. My eyes drifted outside, to the sidewalk where yellow leaves tumbled lazily in the breeze. For once, I didn't feel the pull to document it. No photos, no messages. My phone was off, tucked deep in my bag. I didn't need to be reachable, not now. Across the street, someone stepped out of the inn. For a second, I thought it might be Vera. The posture was familiar. The coat, too. But when the woman turned, it wasn't her. Oddly, I wasn't disappointed. Just unaffected. In the weeks following my withdrawal, I'd stopped checking their social media. I didn't care about their curated moments or which caption Aria used that week to paint herself as family. Let them post, let them spin. I had facts. And more importantly, I had peace. My tea arrived, warm and fragrant. I cupped it in both hands and took the first sip slowly. Last year, I hadn't even made it inside to order. I pulled out a new notebook from my bag, leather-bound, deep burgundy, a gift to myself. I opened to the first page and wrote, "I don't owe anyone silence anymore, and I owe myself everything." I let the pen linger after the period, then flipped the page. Blank. Possibility stretched in front of me, unclaimed and wide open. Later, I wandered the trail behind the inn, the same one I had hoped to walk with my parents, with Seraphine, maybe even with Aria keeping a few feet of polite distance. That version of the story never happened, but this one did. I passed trees that arched over the path like old friends, leaves spinning down gently like confetti. No one clapped, no one watched, and I didn't miss it. I'd spent most of my life building chairs at tables where no one planned to make space for me. Now I was building my own table, my own quiet joy. When the sun dipped behind the hills, I turned back toward the road. The inn lights flickered on. I headed toward my cabin, small, simple, mine. No need to announce my arrival, no need to justify my presence. This seat wasn't given, I claimed it. Some stories don't end with fireworks. Sometimes they end with quiet clarity and a door you choose not to walk back through. If you've ever been erased, replaced, or overlooked in your own family, you know that healing doesn't always come from closure. It comes from choosing yourself, even if no one else does. Have you ever stepped away from a role you were never truly appreciated in? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that dig deep, stir something real, and maybe, just maybe, help someone else feel seen. Hi, I'm Taryn, and while I was overseas for work, my mother sold my childhood cabin, without telling me. She told people I didn't care, that I'd abandoned it, just like I supposedly abandoned the family. But what she didn't know was that the buyer she so proudly handed the deed to was my husband. The worst part? It wasn't just the betrayal. It was how easily she rewrote me out of the story, out of the family, out of my father's legacy. And now I'm wondering, how many years had she been planning to erase me? I was still half asleep when the customs line started to shuffle forward. The terminal lights were harsh after 12 hours in the air, and my feet ached from a week on the go. Tokyo had been worth it. Design breakthroughs, new contacts. But right now, all I wanted was a hot shower and my own bed in San Diego. I pulled my phone from my carry-on, expecting the usual flight mode flurry of emails, but one alert stopped me cold. Escrow initiated, $285,000, 118 Red Pine Lane, Monterey, CA. The cabin. My fingers clenched around the phone. My chest tightened. That wasn't possible. No one was authorized to sell that place but me. At least, they weren't supposed to be. I moved out of line, heart thudding as I reread the notification. It was real. I clicked into the bank's portal. Escrow status, active. Buyer name, withheld. A document ID code I didn't recognize. I hadn't signed anything. Had I? Did I miss an email while abroad? Did someone forge something? I didn't call my lawyer. I called her. The phone rang twice before her voice, chipper and oddly formal, answered. Well, jet setter. You made it back in one piece? Hi, Mom, I said, careful to keep my tone neutral. I got a bank alert. Escrow's been opened for Red Pine? Oh, that, she said breezily. Yes, I handled it. You were out of the country, and it was just sitting there. I blinked. You sold the cabin? I accepted the offer. It's not done. Paperwork's in process. But yes. You'll thank me later, honey. It was time. You sold it without asking me, I said, sharper than I intended. She laughed, light and dismissive. Oh, come on. It's not like you even use the place. You haven't spent a full weekend there in years. It's wasted potential, Taryn. Someone else will appreciate it. Maybe even fix that hideous wood paneling. That paneling was original. My father's hands had sanded it. I still own it, I said. She tisked. Legally, it's more nuanced than that. You know, estate transitions are tricky. I did what was best for the family. And frankly, for you. For me? I asked. Yes, she said brightly. Now you won't have to worry about maintenance, taxes, any of that. This is me lightening your load. There it was. The tone she always used when dressing up control as kindness. The same voice she used when she canceled my father's memorial luncheon and called it practical. The same tone when she told me I didn't need to speak at his funeral because those events are uncomfortable anyway. I didn't argue, not then. Thanks for letting me know, I said evenly. Of course. New owners take possession next Friday. Plenty of time to gather your little mementos. Oh, and don't forget the front gate sticks. Might want to fix that before they arrive. I hung up. I didn't drive to my condo. I drove to Monterey. Even in the fading light, I could see her fingerprints. The flower pots were gone. The paint around the doorframe, paint my father had mixed by hand, was a brighter, colder shade. The lights were on. Her car was gone. The door was unlocked. Inside, it felt like walking into a hotel room after checkout. The living room had been stripped. The couch was missing. Curtains gone. The bookshelf where my dad kept his old paperbacks. Empty. I walked into the kitchen, every step louder in the silence. The trash can caught my eye. Something white poked out near the top. I reached in, pulled out a broken frame with shards of glass still clinging to the corners. Inside was a crumpled photo, me and Dad, covered in sawdust, grinning like fools next to the porch we'd just rebuilt. 2003, summer. I flattened it on the counter, smoothing the creases with shaking hands. Not just selling the cabin, she was erasing it. I stepped outside, phone already to my ear. My attorney's voicemail kicked in. James, it's Taryn. She sold the house. Or tried to. We need to talk. Tomorrow. It's started. The porch creaked as I sat down. The sky above the pine trees was bruised purple. I let the air settle around me, the silence thick with ghosts. I remembered my dad handing me the keys the summer before college. Wherever life takes you, he'd said, you'll always have this, a place to return to. I stared at the driveway where her SUV used to park, at the spot where she told the landscapers to rip out the rose bushes he planted for my mother before she became someone else entirely. If she wants to rewrite history, I murmured, voice steady, she picked the wrong chapter. The porch creaked under my weight as I sat there long enough for the fog to rise again. Monterey always held that quiet chill before dawn, something about the coastal air settling into its skin. I stayed until the sky began to shift gray-blue and the first hint of sunrise tried to push through the trees. Then I stood, walked to my car, and grabbed the spare key I'd kept hidden in the bottom of my glove box, just in case. She hadn't changed the locks. That was almost more insulting. I stepped inside the cabin again, this time with purpose. My phone flashlight cut through the dimness, and what little warmth was left in this place evaporated instantly. The air was hollow, like walking into a showroom, not a home. The hallway was the first punch to the gut. Nails dotted the wooden walls where family photos had once hung, uneven outlines still visible in the faded varnish. My fingers brushed the space where Dad's navy portrait used to be. Gone. No replacements. Not even her usual overdone artwork to fill the void. Room by room, it became clear this wasn't just about selling a house. She'd stripped it of everything personal. Every drawer was emptied, every surface cleared. The books, the old clock that never kept time right, even the little brass turtle paperweight that had sat on the living room shelf since I was 9. All gone. And it wasn't just empty. It was scrubbed. Bleached, almost. As if the place had been professionally sanitized. Not for cleanliness, but for memory. In the corner of the living room, I paused. The fireplace looked different. A faint discoloration near the stone base caught my eye. I knelt, ran my hand over it, and came away with a trace of ash. Not dust. Ash. I stepped outside to the tool shed. It still had that creaky door I always meant to fix. Behind the gardening gloves and rakes, buried beneath a box labeled MISC, I found a plastic garbage bag, half torn open. Inside, remnants of burnt pages, charred edges of scrapbook paper, and a melted photo sleeve. I picked up a fragment and recognized a corner of handwriting, Dad's blocky script. I didn't need to see the rest. I knew exactly what had been destroyed. This wasn't about tidying up for a new owner. This was about erasure. And she did it while I was still on the other side of the world. I stood there for a while in the shed, the morning light beginning to break through the fog outside. My hands didn't shake, not anymore. There was a clarity to the cruelty. She hadn't just removed my things. She had incinerated evidence of our history. By the time I made it back to the house, my phone buzzed. It was Maria Alvarez, our housekeeper growing up. She still helped out from time to time. "I saw your car," her voice came through with a soft lilt. "I didn't know you'd be back this early." "I just landed," I said. "Were you here recently?" She hesitated. "A few days ago. Your mother. She had me help clear things out." "Did she say why?" I asked. Maria took a breath. "She said the new buyers wanted a clean slate, no distractions." "That includes photos?" I asked, careful. "She told me to take anything that looked outdated," Maria said quietly. At first, I saved what I could. I set a box aside. But when she saw it, she got very upset. Told me no one needed reminders. "She made me burn them, Taryn." I froze. "She watched you do it?" Maria's voice dropped to a whisper. "Yes." She stood in the yard with her arms crossed, said, "Some things are better forgotten." She watched until it was ash. Silence stretched between us, not because there was nothing to say, but because nothing made sense. I thanked her, genuinely. Maria didn't deserve the blame. She'd always been caught in the middle of things she didn't sign up for. I asked one last question. Was anything saved? Another pause. "There's something I kept," she said. I knew she'd be furious, but I couldn't let it burn. She told me where she hid it. A box tucked beneath the floorboards in the laundry nook. I found it within minutes. Inside was my father's old compass, brass, worn, still etched with his initials on the back. He'd used it during hikes when I was a kid, always said, "You never get lost if you remember where you started." I closed my hand around it and stood facing the tree line behind the cabin. Let her think she got rid of everything. Let her believe she won. Because I had just found the proof that she hadn't. Not entirely. The drive back to San Diego was longer than usual. Not because of traffic, but because my mind was sorting through every moment like a file clerk on overdrive. Every word Maria had said, every look on my mother's face in past conversations, even the subtle silences that used to slip between her compliments. None of it felt benign anymore. By the time I pulled into my garage, the sun was already leaning low over the ocean. I didn't bother unpacking. I headed straight for the hallway closet and unlocked the small document drawer I'd almost forgotten was there. Inside was the thick manila envelope labeled in my own handwriting, Red Pine, Estate Documentation. I sat on the floor of my living room, cross-legged, flipping through every page my father and his lawyer had prepared years ago. Not just the trust, not just the property title, but amendment dates, witness signatures, the details that wouldn't just prove ownership, they'd explain why it mattered who held it. I found it. A notarized addendum my father insisted on adding 6 months before his final surgery. One line, written in his deliberate script. In the event of any dispute, all decisions regarding Red Pine Lodge fall solely under the discretion of Taryn Belmont. I snapped a picture, uploaded it to a new encrypted folder, and labeled it plainly, Backup, Legal defense. There was no grief in this, just clarity. The next morning, I met with Mr. Grady, my estate attorney. His office in downtown Monterey had the same burnt coffee scent it always did, and he greeted me like I was just there to review a rental contract. I dropped the printed escrow notification on his desk. Can we trace the buyer? Grady adjusted his glasses and logged into the county's real estate system. A few keystrokes, and the screen reflected back at me. Buyer, Highvale West LLC. That name ring any bells? He asked. It doesn't, but give me a second, I said, pulling out my phone and opening the Secretary of State's business lookup tool. I typed quickly. Registered address, 458 Helmsworth Tower, floor 12. My eyes narrowed. That building belonged to Leander's firm. Later that night, after dinner, I waited until we'd both settled onto the patio. The breeze was soft. Nothing about the evening gave away what I was about to say. So, I began slowly, Highvale West LLC? He didn't flinch, just took a slow sip of wine and nodded. I didn't want to tell you until I knew you were ready, he said quietly. But yes, I bought the cabin. You bought it? I made sure your mother thought she was selling it to a private investor, one who'd gut it and flip it for profit. She moved fast. She thought she was getting ahead of you. I stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or shake my head. You didn't think I'd let her walk off with it, did you? He added, a wry smile forming. The truth didn't anger me. If anything, it confirmed what I already suspected. I wasn't alone in this, but I also wasn't letting him carry it. The next morning, I returned to Grady's office. He handed me a printout from a separate file he'd pulled up that morning. Your mother took out a bridge loan last March, he said, used Red Pine as collateral. She never asked me, I said, jaw tightening. She didn't list you as co-owner, he added. She claimed full authority through the estate. She never saw it as mine, I said, almost to myself. She saw it as a mistake she was cleaning up. I thanked him and took the documents. On the drive home, I didn't listen to music. I didn't call anyone. I just reviewed every piece of this in my mind, like a chessboard I'd finally memorized. That night, I began organizing files. The photos, the recordings, Maria's statement, the title amendment. I wasn't preparing for war. I was preparing for exposure. My plan wasn't to burn everything down. It was to let the structure collapse on its own. Leander noticed the folders open on my laptop as I highlighted file names and zipped backups. Planning something? He asked. Not court, I said. Not yet. Then what? I'm going to give her all the rope she wants. I just won't be the one who knots it. He nodded, understanding exactly what I meant without needing another word. We were finishing dishes when my phone vibrated. An email had just come through, subject line bold and bright. Investor Showcase, celebrating the rebirth of Red Pine Lodge. This Saturday at 3 p.m. I opened it. Invitation attached, full color. My mother smiling beside mock-up renderings of my father's cabin. The words Vision, Restoration, Legacy across the top. She wanted applause. Let her have a stage. I closed the email without saying a word and set my phone down beside the sink. The dishes were still half done, but suddenly my appetite for normalcy vanished. She was always good at flipping the narrative, but this was a full production. A grand unveiling of her fiction wrapped in canapes and wine glasses. 2 days later, I stood across the street from her house in Monterey, the same house I grew up in. From the outside, it looked as perfect as ever. White trim, manicured lawn, a seasonal wreath on the door. A line of BMWs and Teslas stretched down the block. The driveway overflowed with chatter from realtors, donors, and her carefully curated guest list. I didn't see a single car with a dent. Even her audience was filtered. Inside, everything was timed. Vera Langford's events always were. I was let in by a college-aged intern in a blazer far too tight, holding a clipboard and asking for affiliation. I smiled and gave her my name. The girl blinked. Oh, you're... I know, I said, stepping past her. The foyer was full of smiling faces and polite nods. Most of them I hadn't seen in years. Neighbors, board members, that couple who used to host the church Christmas party but hadn't invited me since Dad died. A projector screen dominated the living room wall. The rebirth of Red Pine was printed in cursive on every sign and cocktail napkin. Vera floated through the crowd like a swan in pearls, laughing just loud enough to signal comfort. She greeted everyone with air kisses and firm hands on shoulders. When our eyes finally met, she tilted her head in surprise. "Taryn," she said, smoothing the fabric of her blouse. "You came." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied. She didn't hug me. She didn't need to. She gestured toward the front of the room, where a slideshow was about to begin. "Let me show everyone what a little vision can do." I moved to the back of the room, quietly slipping out my phone and switching the video to record. The lights dimmed and the first slide came up. A photo of the cabin's porch. Before. It had been deliberately desaturated, made to look like a crime scene in grayscale. "This is what we started with." Vera's voice floated above the room. "Tired, neglected, abandoned." Abandoned. The word echoed louder than she'd said it. Slide after slide followed. The after photos were glossy renderings of a sterile cabin, stripped of its soul. The porch my father and I rebuilt by hand, replaced with a deck that looked like it came from a catalog. The stained glass window he'd restored for my 16th birthday, gone. Red Pine wasn't just saved, she said, clasping her hands dramatically. It was reborn. Applause. Soft, classy, perfectly timed. I didn't clap. I tapped my phone screen once to mark the recording. Halfway through her speech, I noticed movement to my right. My nephew, Owen, was standing beside me, fidgeting with the edge of a napkin. "Hey, bud," I said, kneeling a little. "You remember me?" He blinked. "Grandma said you don't like being here." "She did?" "She said you moved far away because you didn't want to be part of the family stuff." I smiled gently. "Well, sometimes grown-ups say things that aren't quite right." "She also said the house was hers." I paused. "Did she?" He nodded and leaned in closer. "But I thought Grandpa gave it to you. He told me once." I tousled his hair and whispered, "You've got a good memory, kid." He ran off when someone called his name, and I turned my phone camera toward the screen again. But this time, I wasn't just documenting. I was calculating. I made a mental note of every guest who clapped the loudest, the ones who lingered near the stage, the woman who whispered "remarkable" when Vera mentioned funding it all herself. By the end of the night, I'd asked a distant family friend, Janice from my dad's side, for a copy of the slideshow. "For nostalgia," I said. She emailed it before she even left the driveway. As the party thinned out, I found myself near the valet station. The air was cooler now, and most guests had left or retreated indoors. Then I heard her heels behind me. "Funny seeing you here, Taryn," she said, voice light, almost amused. "Did you finally decide to let go?" I turned slowly, the valet ticket already in my hand. "Letting go is easy," I said, voice calm. "Watching what replaces it, that's harder." Her smile faltered, but only slightly. She didn't know what I'd recorded. She didn't know what Owen had said. She had no idea that her carefully choreographed rewrite had just become Exhibit A. The next morning came fast, but sleep had never arrived. I was already dressed and seated in the reception area of Grady's law office before the secretary even unlocked the front door. She looked surprised to see me, but I gave her a quick smile and gestured to my file folder. "Coffee's brewing," she said kindly. "He'll be in any minute." I didn't need coffee. I needed confirmation. Grady's office was warm, lined with books and heavy wooden furniture that smelled like dust in law school. He greeted me with his usual calm, but studied me for a beat longer than usual. "You got the slideshow I forwarded?" I asked, setting my file on his desk. "I did." And the full public escrow docs just updated this morning. I thought you might want to see this, he said, sliding a new stack toward me. There it was, my name, in neat digital type, appearing beneath a signature that looked close enough to mine to fool most people, except for one detail. That, Grady said, tapping the page, is a reused authorization form. She pulled it from a billing document you signed back in 2021. Utility setup. I leaned back slowly. So she stretched one line into a whole transaction. She repurposed your consent for power and internet into legal approval to sell real estate. My voice came out low. That's not forgery. That's strategic fraud. Which is still fraud, he said gently. It also means we can move, if you want to. I wasn't ready to blow the lid yet. Not here. Not now. Instead, I drove downtown to the design showroom Vera had worked with during her renovations. I didn't call ahead. I walked in mid-morning, greeting the woman at the front desk like we were old acquaintances. She offered me sparkling water and gave me a quick tour of the small curated gallery. Halfway through, I saw it. A framed letter on the wall. To the incredible team at Haven and Hart, thank you for bringing new life to Red Pine. Your creativity helped me turn decay into beauty. Vera Langford. The letter was printed on their blog last week. I'd seen it, but seeing it framed, that was new. Near the reception counter sat a low stack of invoices, half tucked into a branded folder. I flipped through gently, feigning interest. And there it was. An invoice from 2 years ago. Red Pine prep work. Total $8,400. Billed to Langford Project. I held the page to the light. There, faint but visible in the digital watermark, was my company name, Belmont and Birch. I hadn't realized she'd used my accounts to fund her campaign. I had forgotten that I'd paid for the early inspections, the demo permits, the landscape consultant, because she told me they were temporary assessments. Nothing permanent. I flagged down the showroom manager, a cheerful woman in her 50s, with a bob cut and wine-colored glasses. Quick question, I said. Did Vera ever mention where the funding came from? She smiled, leaned in. She said it was a gift, from her daughter, a surprise. I smiled back. That's sweet. Must be nice to get that kind of generosity. She laughed. Tell me about it. We never even met her. I left 10 minutes later, calm and quiet. Once inside my car, I opened my voice memo app and began speaking as I drove. She didn't just forge my name, she forged my intent. She painted over every trace of my involvement with a single narrative and had the gall to hang it on a wall. When I got home, I forwarded the invoices and photos to Grady with the subject, Exhibit B. Then I uploaded copies to a private drive labeled Red Pine Truth, a folder that was growing by the hour. That evening, as I sipped tea and stared out the window, I composed a short, precise email. Subject, Use of Identity and Intellectual Property. Body. Effective immediately, I request the removal of all public-facing materials that reference my name, business, or implied contributions. You have 48 hours to comply before I pursue formal action. No threats, no emotion, just legal bones. She didn't respond. But 2 hours later, the blog post vanished. The showroom manager texted me, Odd, just got a call from Vera's team. Said to pull everything. I replied with a polite thumbs up and turned off notifications. At 11:58 p.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, a group email. Family thread, unironically titled Belmont Circle. From Vera Langford. Subject, Family unity matters, let's not escalate this. The message was short. We've all benefited from the work done at Red Pine. Please remember what's been provided, and let's move forward without resentment. No child should bite the hand that raised her. I stared at the screen for a while. Then I hit Reply All. But instead of typing, I just sat there, letting the silence speak louder than anything I could have written. I left the laptop open on the kitchen counter that night, the email still glowing in its accusatory stillness. No response, No draft. Just the weight of silence and that single line from Vera. No child should bite the hand that raised her. It kept echoing like an old church bell no one had asked to hear. Thursday came, and with it, an invitation I hadn't asked for either. Crosby had texted, "Family brunch, 11 a.m., just us. Let's clear the air." He added a smiley face, as if emoji could patch what years of avoidance and one fraudulent property sale had torn apart. I showed up anyway. His home in Carmel looked like a magazine cover, all white walls and curated furniture that made me want to breathe more carefully than usual. Vera was already there, seated comfortably near the head of the long dining table, legs crossed, coffee in hand. Crosby's wife greeted me with polite tension, the kind reserved for distant relatives and scandal management. Crosby gestured for me to sit. "Let's just talk." I sat across from Vera. She didn't speak at first, just gave me a tight smile, like we were in on the same performance. "We've all made mistakes," Crosby said, eyes shifting between us. "But let's not let this get worse. We're family." Vera turned to him smoothly. "I raised her. That house was never hers, not in spirit." I didn't flinch. Then Crosby pulled out a folded document and slid it across the table. "It's just a formality," he said. "Non-litigation agreement. No public accusations. No media. Just move forward, for the sake of the family name." I picked it up without opening it. "So that's it?" I asked. "I'm the liability you want to put on mute?" Crosby shifted uncomfortably. "That's not what this is about." "Of course it is," I said. "You'd rather protect the illusion of unity than face what she's done." Vera's tone never changed. "You always did overreact, Taryn. I gave you a start in life. That cabin was never meant to be an anchor around your neck." I placed the paper back down, folded neatly. "No," I said, "but it wasn't meant to be your footstool either." I didn't stay for the eggs. Back at home, I found Leander on the patio, going through some files for work. I sat beside him and pulled the document from my bag, dropped it onto the table between us. "They want quiet," I said. He scanned it, then chuckled. "No, they want obedience." He walked inside, returned with a manila folder, and handed it to me. I opened it to see transcripts, verbatim quotes from Vera, taken during escrow calls. He'd redacted names but left her words intact. "She talks too much when she thinks she's already won," he said. "She built her family tree out of illusions," I murmured, reading the highlighted lines. "I'm pruning it." That night, I emailed my attorney. We issued a formal counterclaim intent. No theatrics, just paperwork, time-stamped and precise. Then I renamed the private folder I'd been building for weeks, Red Pine Reclamation. The next morning, Vera replied, "No pleasantries, just one line. If you go forward with this, you are no longer my daughter." I read it twice. The line didn't sting the way she probably meant it to. I printed it, slid it into a folder labeled Freedom, and placed it beside the rest of the documentation. It belonged there now. That night, long after Leander had gone to bed, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from the escrow lawyer. "Taryn," his voice said, formal but tight. "We have a problem. Mrs. Langford tried to access sealed contract files tied to the sale. Her credentials didn't authorize her for that level of access. The buyer, your LLC, is requesting legal review." I leaned back in my chair and stared out the window. She pushed too far. Now the paper she forged might bury her. By mid-morning Friday, I was back in Grady's office. I didn't even take off my coat. He was already on the phone when I walked in, his expression unreadable, the kind he used when news came in and he hadn't decided whether to soften it for me or not. He hung up, stood, and motioned toward a chair. "She's suing you," he said plainly. "Libel and harassment. Filed this morning. Her lawyer served us the documents about an hour ago." My first instinct wasn't surprise. It was silence. "She's throwing the first punch in public now," I said. He nodded. That's how it's structured. Her argument is that you've spread misinformation, damaged her reputation, and weaponized private documents. I let out a breath. She thinks the truth is slander? She's betting on public fatigue, that the longer it goes, the more it looks like a family squabble. And your advice? Grady leaned forward. Don't hand her the shovel. Stay quiet. Let the case expose itself. I left the office without speaking again. I needed air, not answers. Back at home, I tried to distract myself with emails, invoices, anything unrelated. I opened an old Gmail account I hadn't used in years, linked to a financial platform I used for a brief consulting stint. One unread notification caught my eye. Welcome to Legacy Investors Wealth Account. It was dated 3 weeks ago. I clicked through the details. Taryn Belmont, address listed as my parents' old place, my birth date, the last 4 digits of my social security number. There was a line for voice verification, marked complete. I called the platform's fraud division immediately. The agent was efficient, but too calm. We can confirm the account is under review. You didn't authorize this? No. Someone verified it via voice. A woman? Pause. Yes. I stared out my window, knuckles white against the mug in my hand. When Leander got home that evening, I told him everything. She's not just desperate, he said. She's gone criminal. It's not even about money, I replied. She's not stealing. She's constructing something, building an alternate version of me. He rubbed his jaw. She's rewriting who you are on paper so she can justify who you aren't in real life. That night, I started compiling a list of every email where she used my name to speak on my behalf. Invoices she'd paid with my company card before changing the billing address. Screenshots of her blog posts, thanks to my daughter's generosity, all while suing me for character damage. I labeled the folder, Red Pine Reclamation, Phase Type 2. My silence used to protect her. Now it only enabled her. Around 8 p.m., Crosby called. Taryn, listen, he started, his voice strained. I stayed silent. She's really upset, he said. She's saying you're attacking her in public, trying to ruin her. I haven't said a word to the press, I answered calmly. Well, maybe not the press, but people talk, and she says you're escalating. I'm documenting, I said. That's different. She's scared. No, I corrected. She's exposed. There was a pause. I just don't want this to tear the family apart, he said quietly. I hung up without saying another word. Later that night, I opened the file, double-checked the organization. Everything was there, clean, timed, unarguable. And just as I was shutting down for the night, an email came in. No subject, no signature, sent from a burner address. You should be careful what you dig up, it read. You might not like what your father left behind. I stared at the screen for a long time. But I already know, and that's what makes me dangerous. By the time Monday morning arrived, I wasn't nervous anymore. I'd worn through panic and outrage somewhere between printing my 6th affidavit and organizing audio files by timestamp. Now there was only clarity. Stillness, like a surgeon before the first incision. The conflict hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. in a conference suite above the escrow office. It had been requested by the third-party legal rep, a neutral mediator tasked with preventing transaction fraud. I arrived 10 minutes early, documents in hand, dressed like I was going to a funeral. Maybe I was. Vera entered at 10:01 on the dot. Her attorney, a tall man with a voice built for commercials, accompanied her. She wore a pale cream blazer, pearl earrings, and a smile so polished it felt laminated. She looked across the room at me and said nothing. I returned the favor. The mediator called us to order and reviewed the issue. Conflicting signatures, potential identity misuse, a sudden spike in escrow-related access violations. He turned toward Vera. We've reached the stage where the buyer's identity must be disclosed to ensure no conflict of interest. Ms. Langford, please confirm your awareness of the purchasing party. Vera nodded coolly. We were informed it was a private development firm. The door opened behind her. Leander stepped in, calm, his blazer unbuttoned, eyes steady. "I'm the managing member of Highvale West LLC," he said. "I purchased Red Pine Lodge on behalf of my wife." I didn't flinch, but Vera did. She turned slowly toward him, then to me. "This is a setup," she hissed. "No," I said evenly. "This is a consequence." The mediator asked if there were any conflicts of interest previously undisclosed. Vera's attorney stammered something about good faith, but I was already reaching for my laptop. "I'd like to submit supporting evidence for the record," I said, plugging in the HDMI cable. A few clicks, and the room filled with the sound of Vera's voice, clear, recorded weeks earlier in the design showroom. "She was always the mistake," she said on playback. "That cabin should have never been hers. Once she's erased from it, I'll finally get to live in peace." Nobody moved. The mediator cleared his throat and tapped his pen twice. "There appears to be sufficient ethical conflict. Based on this recording and the disputed paperwork, escrow is hereby suspended pending fraud review. The property will remain under buyer hold until resolution." Vera's smile had disappeared. Her attorney whispered something in her ear. She didn't answer. Later that day, just before sunset, I drove to the old family house. Vera was pacing in the back garden, near the rose bushes my father planted the year I turned 10. I didn't announce myself. I just walked through the side gate, like I had done 1,000 times before. She turned the moment she heard the latch click. "You humiliated me," she snapped. "No," I said quietly. "You did that the moment you called me disposable." Her face tightened. "You think this gets your father back? His attention? His love?" I stepped closer, just enough for her to see I didn't need her to understand, only to hear. "I don't need him back," I said. "I need the thing he left me safe from you." She looked like she wanted to respond, but couldn't find words that wouldn't unravel her. Instead, she sat, right there in the dirt-streaked garden chair, shoulders stiff, mouth shut. I didn't gloat. I didn't stay. On my drive home, my phone buzzed again. A message from the escrow mediator. "Escrow status suspended. Fraud review pending. Buyer retains property hold." I pulled into my driveway, turned off the engine, and sat in the stillness. This was never just about a cabin. It was about being seen. 2 days after the escrow freeze, I sat at a quiet cafe near the bluff overlooking Red Pine. The morning fog hadn't lifted yet, and neither had the weight in my chest. I wasn't looking for conversation, but it found me anyway. A woman I recognized from the HOA board, Ellen or Elaine, something with an E, approached cautiously, like I might mistake her for someone loyal to Vera. She leaned in, voice low. "That recording at the hearing, people are talking, not just neighbors, donors, sponsors. It's rippling." I nodded once. "Some are backing out of the community auction," she added. "Your mother's name has been quietly removed from the program." I met her gaze. "I didn't do it for applause," I said. "I did it so I wouldn't have to explain myself again." She offered a quick, tight smile. "You shouldn't have had to." When she walked away, I finished my coffee in silence, watching the fog dissolve. For once, I didn't feel the need to follow it with more action. The truth was finally moving on its own. Later that afternoon, I stopped by the cabin to check the exterior. The gate lock had been changed at my request after the hearing. I wanted to be sure everything was secure before contractors arrived to inspect the foundation next week. I hadn't expected company. A man from the neighborhood, tall, wiry, mid-70s, stood by the fence, hands in his coat pockets. I knew his face, but not his name. "Miss Belmont," he said, voice hesitant. "You have a moment?" I nodded. "I shouldn't get involved, but my wife and we were at the investor thing. We heard the audio." He paused, then added, "We believed every word." I stayed quiet. Let him speak. "She told my wife something a few years ago," he said, "that you weren't really hers. That you were adopted. From another man. I blinked. Excuse me? He glanced down at the gravel. It didn't sound casual. It sounded rehearsed, like she needed a reason not to include you in something. I didn't know what it meant at the time. I didn't respond. I simply looked at him, then nodded slowly, thanked him, and watched him walk away. Back inside the cabin, I pulled out my journal and wrote it down. Not for drama, for documentation, for myself. She didn't just try to take the house, she tried to make it look like I never belonged in it. That line sat alone on the page. That evening, back home, I opened the neighborhood forum page for the Monterey Estates community group. A new thread had popped up. Anonymous, but the writing was familiar. If someone could do this to her own daughter, what's stopping her from mismanaging our community's accounts? Replies poured in, some skeptical, others bluntly critical. A few defended her with tired lines like, family drama shouldn't be public. But most said what I hadn't dared hope. I'm glad someone finally spoke up. Leander glanced over my shoulder. That's enough, he said, pointing at the screen. You don't need to push more. Let them do the pushing now. I nodded. He was right. It was already out there. That night, I sat at the desk with my headphones in, revisiting the audio files. Not to strategize, but to understand. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. I clicked on the folder labeled Legacy and opened the oldest voice memo. My father's voice, grainy, recorded on a road trip years ago, floated through the speakers. He was singing along to some old Van Morrison tune, badly off key. I didn't cry, I just listened. Then I opened my contacts, scrolled to Vera Langford, and pressed delete. Final step. Emotional release. Uninvited mother from my life. Just before bed, Malis texted, "Did you hear? Grandma's pulling her name from the neighborhood legacy fund. Says she's being erased." I stared at the message for a minute. I typed, "She erased herself." Deleted it. Typed again. "No one erased her. She just ran out of ink." Sent. The envelope from the state court system arrived on a Tuesday, tucked among circulars and credit card offers. It was thin. No weight to it. No need. Its contents had already been written in the space between what she tried to do and what the world had finally seen. Inside, Vera Langford's formal withdrawal of all pending legal complaints. One page. Neatly signed. No apology. Just absence. I held it between my fingers for a moment, then placed it on the kitchen counter beside the compass and the now dried lilies. No court ruling, I whispered, could have said what that silence just did. Grady called a few hours later, confirming what I already knew. "You've got clear title. Fraud confirmed. Escrow nullified." The board cited deliberate deception with personal conflict. She's banned from representing the property or any other under that agency moving forward. "Any appeal?" He hesitated. "She waived the right in writing." "And damages?" "You'd win them, easily. But do you want that fight?" I thought about it, really thought about it, then said, "No, I already won." That afternoon, a courier buzzed the door. Large bouquet. White lilies, red roses. The note was unsigned but familiar. "You win, enjoy your ruins. V." I didn't react. I untied the ribbon, pulled the bouquet apart gently. The lilies were still fragrant, still full of light. I kept those. The roses. Velvety, dark, dramatic. I dropped into the trash without hesitation. Drama belonged there. The lilies went into a mason jar beside my father's compass, his initials still etched into the back. I adjusted the stems and stepped away. Later that week, I attended a local women's advocacy event, something I'd RSVP'd 2 weeks ago before everything exploded. I wasn't there to speak, just to listen. But word had spread, quietly, carefully. 3 women approached me separately, between sessions. Each had their own version of Vera. Different names, different lies, same bruises beneath the skin. "You said it out loud," one whispered. "I didn't say anything," I replied. I just stopped pretending. Another offered a hug, soft and unassuming. I let her. During a breakout group, someone asked what justice looks like after family betrayal. I didn't plan to speak, but the silence pulled me forward. Sometimes justice isn't loud, I said. It's just quiet enough for truth to finally echo. A few people nodded. One woman wiped her eye. Then we moved on. The next day, Malis texted again. She's out of the legacy fund. Her name's been pulled. I didn't ask who made the decision. I didn't need to. She says she's being canceled, Milas added. My reply came quickly. She canceled herself. But I deleted it. Typed again. That's what happens when your only currency is control. I hit send and went on with my day. That night, as I sat on the porch, the breeze coming in cool over the city lights, I let myself breathe. Not as a defense, but as release. The phone chimed again. Another envelope was on the way. But this one, this final one, didn't need to carry weight. It would confirm what I already knew, that now the noise was gone. I could finally hear what healing sounded like. The envelope arrived 3 days later. Not with a thud, not with fanfare, just quietly slipped into my mailbox like any other folded bill or neighborhood flyer. I didn't rush to open it. I let it sit on the entryway table while I made tea, while I watered the succulents by the window, while the cat slept across my laptop keyboard like she owned the place. By the time I finally opened it, I already knew what was inside. Confirmation of closure, written in bureaucratic language. Vera Langford's final legal withdrawal. Nothing left pending. No appeals. No fine print. But what moved me more was what came in the same delivery. A handwritten card postmarked from Malis. The envelope was pale blue, the handwriting unmistakably hers. Slanted, neat, a little loop on every Y. Inside was a note just 2 lines long. You weren't wrong. You were braver than the rest of us. Tucked behind it was a photo, a faded Polaroid from when we were kids. Dad had his arm around me, paintbrush in the other hand, both of us beaming beside the half-painted fence at Red Pine. My jeans were too long, rolled at the ankles, and my hair was in that awkward half-bang phase. He looked proud, not of the fence, of me. I placed the photo beside the mason jar of lilies and the old compass. I didn't cry. I just exhaled. Later that afternoon, I drove up to Red Pine. The air smelled different now, cleaner, maybe, because the restoration was finally underway. The porch was stripped bare again, the boards stacked neatly for refinishing. The deck she had installed had already been removed, revealing the original beams my father and I had installed all those summers ago. The windows she'd replaced were gone too, and the ones I saved, his, were waiting to be reinstalled. I walked the length of the hallway inside. There were no more signs of her in this place. Not one. But I didn't try to make it look like it used to. I wasn't restoring a memory. I was building something that made sense to who I was now. This place doesn't have to be what it was. It just has to reflect who I am now. A few days later, I stood on the bluff that overlooked the coast just beyond the property. The wind was sharp but grounding. I pulled a small fire-safe box from my tote and placed it on the wooden bench my father had once carved initials into with a pocket knife. Inside the box was the court withdrawal letter, and every other document tied to the legal war we'd just endured. One by one, I folded them neatly and tucked them in. Some things don't deserve to be burned, but they do need to be buried. I locked the box and placed it in the dry storage under the bench. It wasn't about hiding it. It was about deciding it didn't need to be carried anymore. That evening, Leander joined me on the porch at home. No words, just the two of us, and the sound of breeze moving through the trees beyond the deck. After a while, I said, I'm not waiting for an apology. I'm not hoping for change. And that's why I'm finally free. He smiled, sipped his tea. You were always free, he said. You just stopped asking for permission. Later, while wrapping up a few invoices for the contractors, I received an email from the Monterey Historical Society. They were organizing a community heritage event, inviting families to share stories and artifacts tied to long-standing properties. They wanted someone to present about Red Pine Lodge. I stared at the email for a long moment, not because I didn't know what to say, but because for the first time, I realized I had a choice. Not just what to say, what to carry forward. I closed the laptop gently, leaned back in the chair, and whispered into the room, just loud enough for myself to hear. Legacy isn't what they leave behind. It's what we choose to carry. The morning of the event came without drama. No last-minute emails, no veiled warnings, no fresh subpoenas in my mailbox. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't ask for permission. The kind that says, "It's time." Red Pine looked like itself again. Not exactly as it once had been, but finally as it should have been. Steady, honest, whole. The porch was rebuilt with the same grainy timber Dad and I had once sanded together. The stained glass window finally sealed back into place, casting fractured color across the living room floor. Guests began to arrive slowly, most of them familiar from childhood events, local functions, or years of nodding acquaintance. A few were total strangers, community members, new residents, people who came out of respect or curiosity. There were no banners, no catered trays or scheduled speeches, just open doors and sunlight spilling in. I wore jeans and a black sweater, my hair tied back simply. I greeted everyone with warmth, but not formality. No one asked for explanations. They didn't have to. The house spoke loud enough. Inside, everything was intentional. On the mantel, the compass. Next to it, the dried lilies, preserved behind glass. One framed photo hung on the back wall. Dad and I painting that fence, same one Milas had sent. No wall of family portraits, no lineage on display. Just presents. There was a single plaque near the entryway. Nothing flashy, just metal mounted to reclaimed wood. This place belonged to whoever protected it. At some point, someone from the town's heritage committee pulled me aside. She handed me a small bronze placard. "For you," she said, smiling. "Official recognition from the city." I read it silently. Red Pine Lodge, maintained by preservation, not possession. I thanked her, but I didn't make a speech, didn't pose with it. I asked her to leave it unmounted for now. I wasn't done deciding where it should go. During the walkthrough, a woman I didn't recognize asked softly, "Will your mother be coming today?" I paused, then answered simply, "She came once." That was enough. No need to elaborate. After everyone left, I stayed. Cleaned up empty cups, folded guest cards, wiped down counters. When I stepped outside onto the porch, Leander was already there, sitting cross-legged with 2 mugs of tea, steam curling into the early dusk. I sat beside him, barefoot, letting the grain of the wood press gently against my skin. For a long while, we didn't speak. We just watched the trees sway with the last stretch of autumn wind. Then, finally, I said it. I didn't get back what I lost. I just got strong enough to stop losing more. He nodded, not as affirmation, but as witness. That was enough. As the sun slid behind the hills, its light streamed through the stained glass behind us, scattering color across the floor. Red, gold, violet, green. I watched it move across the wood, the same wood we had once knelt on in sweat and sawdust. Somewhere deep inside, something eased. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the house that stayed, and the daughter who finally knew why. And that was enough.
Hello, my name is Naomi. When I was just 14, my parents drove me to my grandfather's porch, left without a word, and never came back. No calls, no birthdays, nothing. For 10 years, I thought maybe they'd had a reason. But then, Grandpa died. And suddenly, they showed up, smiling, dressed in black, asking about his $45 million estate like nothing had happened. They said they were here to grieve. But were they really mourning him? Or chasing the money they once walked away from? They tried to sue me, follow me, break me. The day they left me didn't start with shouting. It started with silence, the kind that presses against your skin like cold air through an open window. I sat in the back seat of my parents' car, my knees tucked to my chest, a sweater balled up under my chin. It was my favorite one, sky blue with the little stitched initials NC that Grandma had sewn on herself. Neither of them spoke. My mother stared straight ahead, her hands tight around the steering wheel. My father tapped his knee, rhythmic, anxious. The tires hummed beneath us, rolling down that winding North Carolina road I'd known all my life. I cleared my throat, trying to push the words up. "Where are we going?" Mom blinked but didn't look back. "To your grandpa's, just for a little while." Just for a little while. I remember that phrase, how carefully she chose it, how her voice was too even, too smooth, like she'd practiced in front of a mirror. I was only 14, but I wasn't stupid. Something was wrong. "Is this like before, when you went to Florida?" I asked. Dad let out a short exhale, part laugh, part regret. "No, sweetheart, this is different." When we pulled up to Grandpa Eldon's driveway, I sat frozen, gripping the strap of my bag. My mother still didn't look at me. My father reached over, opened the door from the front and mumbled, "Go on, he's expecting you." But that was a lie. Grandpa stepped out, still in his gardening gloves, his forehead creased with confusion. He looked at me, then at the car. "What's going on?" "They didn't say," I answered, stepping out slowly. The wheels were already turning before the screen door had even shut behind me. I didn't cry right then. I couldn't. My body didn't know how to process what had just happened. I turned back toward the street, half expecting the brake lights to flare, the window to roll down, my mother's voice to call out, "Naomi, wait! We forgot to tell you something." But nothing. Just the tail lights shrinking until they disappeared behind the curve. Inside, Grandpa Eldon set a pot of water to boil. He tried to talk, to ask about school, about the field trip I'd missed. But I wasn't listening. I kept scanning the window, every pair of headlights tricking my brain into hope. Later that night, when he burned the spaghetti, he muttered, "Guess I'm out of practice." I smiled because I didn't want him to feel bad. He brought me a forkful and said, "Eat up, kiddo. Tomorrow's going to be better." But tomorrow didn't come. Not the one I was waiting for. The guest room smelled like mothballs and old wood. I unpacked my bag, looking for the things I'd always carried. My instant camera, the birthday card Mom wrote me last year, that little charm bracelet I wore every summer. Gone. In their place was a crumpled receipt from a pawn shop in Charlotte. A few item codes. One said Charm B. Another, Kodak Instax. My gut twisted. They'd sold them. My keepsakes, my memories, my life, converted into cash. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling and let the betrayal settle in like a fever. The next morning, Grandpa made scrambled eggs. I nodded through it, trying not to cry when he asked what I wanted to do that weekend. As I reached for my fork, I remembered a week earlier, asking my mom to come to my school dinner. She had smiled and said, "I've got something more important that night." Now I knew what that something was. Around noon, I took my plate to the sink, then wandered into the living room. The clock ticked loud, too loud. Every time a car passed outside, I flinched, running to the window. By evening, I stopped running. But I still watched, and waited. The days that followed blurred together. Grief doesn't move in straight lines. It swirls, clings, stops your breath at the most ordinary moments. Sometimes it was the smell of pipe tobacco lingering in Grandpa Eldon's chair. Sometimes it was the hollow quiet after dinner, where his voice used to fill the silence. By the time the funeral arrived, I thought I had braced myself for everything. I was wrong. The service was small, simple, just how he would have wanted it, no fanfare, no spectacle. A few of his old colleagues came. Some former students too, each sharing stories about how he'd pushed them to be better, how he believed in them even when no one else did. I sat in the front row, the gold key necklace he gave me resting just below my collarbone. My hands were folded tight in my lap. Then they walked in. It was like someone dropped ice water down my spine. The door creaked, a breeze swept in, and there they were, Marlon and Lorene, standing side by side like a pair of wax statues someone forgot to dust off. I froze. 10 years. 10 full years of nothing. No calls, no birthday cards, no apologies. And now here they were, dressed in black, acting like it was just another Sunday service. Marlon nodded toward the front row like he expected me to wave him over. Lorene smiled, fake and polished, and whispered to the usher, "We're her parents." I couldn't move. My pulse thudded in my ears. They didn't just look older, they looked worn, like life hadn't been kind, but somehow they still wore entitlement like a tailored coat. They slipped into the second pew behind me, as if nothing had ever happened, as if they hadn't left a child on a doorstep and driven away. When the service ended, people began to trickle out, offering hugs and handshakes. I kept my eyes low until I felt a familiar perfume, cheap vanilla and lavender. I didn't have to look up. "Naomi, my sweet girl," Lorene murmured, reaching for my arm. I pulled back before she could touch me. "Don't." Her face crumpled like I had wounded her. "We came as soon as we heard. We're so sorry. Your grandfather, he meant the world to us." Marlon chimed in, louder than necessary. "He was proud of you, Naomi. You've grown into quite the woman." That was rich, coming from a man who hadn't seen me since I was barely a teenager. "You don't get to say that," I said, my voice sharp. "You weren't there." He blinked but didn't flinch. "We made mistakes, sure, but we're here now." Now, as if that erased everything. I turned to leave, but Lorene stepped in front of me, holding out a folded slip of paper. "I know you're angry, but please, I've been sick. It's cancer. Early stage. I didn't want to tell you like this." The paper was a printout, medical letterhead. I scanned it quickly, then tucked it into my purse without a word. Later that night, I ran a reverse image search. The same document popped up on a downloadable template site, a sample from a fake diagnosis form generator. She lied. I didn't call her out, not yet, but the fuse had been lit, and it was burning low. The next day, as I cleaned out Grandpa's study, a knock tapped lightly on the doorframe. It was Virgil, Eldon's lawyer, always in suspenders, always carrying a worn leather folder that looked older than both of us combined. "I figured you'd be here," he said, walking in slowly. "He left something for you, but more importantly, he left a warning." I tilted my head. "What kind of warning?" Virgil lowered his voice. "Your parents. He suspected they'd show up once he passed. He took precautions." He reached into his folder, pulling out a sealed envelope and a typed memo. "The will reading is in 72 hours. You'll need to be there, and you'll need this." He tapped the gold key around my neck. I stared at it. Suddenly it felt heavier than before. "What exactly did he leave behind?" I asked. Virgil gave a measured smile. "Let's just say, more than memories." That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, turning the key over in my fingers. My thoughts spiraled. I remembered waiting by the window all those years ago, convinced they'd return for love. Now I knew better. They came back, but not for me. "You waited 10 years to show up," I whispered into the quiet. "Let's see what you're really here for." The morning came, heavy with gray clouds, but I didn't leave my room. I spent most of the day sorting through old files, trying to ignore the mental static in my head. By sunset, the light had shifted just enough that Grandpa's study didn't feel so haunted. It wasn't just a room anymore. It was a vault, a place where his intentions had been carefully buried, protected. I walked in slowly, every creak of the floorboards under my feet making the space feel more alive. The scent of cedar was still there, sharp and grounding. His desk sat untouched, the leather chair slightly turned as if he had just gotten up. I opened the middle drawer, not expecting much. Stationery, a few loose paper clips, an old checkbook, nothing important. But something in the back corner caught my attention. A ridge, barely noticeable, where the wood didn't quite line up. I pressed against it. It popped open. Beneath the false bottom was a sealed folder marked in Grandpa's cursive, M&M, March 2011. My throat tightened. I pulled it out and laid it flat. The contents made my pulse race. Copies of legal documents, each one a fake. Signatures forged with painful accuracy. A notarized letter with Eldon's name. Except it wasn't his signature. A deed transfer authorization. authorization to move his financial accounts. My mother's and father's names appeared again and again. I couldn't breathe. They didn't just leave me. They tried to take everything while I was still under Eldon's roof. I had spent years believing their absence was shame. But this, it was strategy. It was theft in motion. Among the pages was a letter from Eldon to his attorney, dated just weeks after the forged documents. They attempted to access my retirement accounts through falsified permissions. I am initiating full legal protection. Remove them from all access, including emergency contact privileges. Naomi will remain with me. It all made sense now. The silence. The distance. Eldon hadn't been cold. He had been protecting me. And they weren't just guilty of abandonment. They were trying to rewrite ownership, legacy, blood. I sat down in the leather chair, hands trembling slightly. I reached for the drawer on the left, needing air, needing something else. What I found next almost broke me. A journal, bound in cracked black leather. Eldon's handwriting covered every page. Some entries were mundane, weather, meetings, recipe notes, but one stood out, dated 3 years ago. I've been debating whether to leave it all to the Montgomery Foundation. It's clean, detached, no strings. But Naomi, she shows up. She studies, works, never asks for anything. She reminds me of how I started. That means something. There was more. If anything happens to me, let the key decide. I stared at the words, numb. Grandpa had thought of giving it all away, to strangers, to some clean nonprofit name. But something about the way I lived changed his mind. And now? The weight of that decision was sitting against my chest in the form of a small gold key. I stood up, carrying the folder and journal into the hallway. My feet moved on their own, past the den, into the kitchen, where I dialed Virgil's number. He answered on the first ring. I found something, I said. There was a pause. You found the file? How did you know it was there? Because Eldon knew you'd be the only one who'd look, Virgil replied calmly. He told me if you ever needed to prove intent, that file was your shield. I placed a hand on the counter, bracing myself. They forged legal papers, tried to drain his accounts. I know, he said. He stopped them just in time, but they've been waiting for another shot ever since. My voice went flat. They came back for the money. They came back for control. But it's too late, Virgil said. The will is tomorrow. Brace yourself, Naomi. You'll hear things that aren't just lies. There'll be manipulations designed to undo you. I didn't sleep that night. I sat back in Grandpa's study, surrounded by his things, by the quiet hum of the house he kept safe for so long. In my left hand was the folder filled with betrayal. In my right, the journal filled with trust. They thought they could steal what they never earned. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling as the hours slipped by. Tomorrow, I whispered, you'll learn the cost of coming back empty. I didn't even realize the sun had risen until the light bled through the hallway, cutting across the study floor. I changed clothes slowly, methodically, like putting on armor. The pendant rested on my chest, heavier than gold should feel. I tucked it beneath my blouse, then grabbed the sealed folder and stepped out the door. Downtown Asheville was buzzing, too alive for a morning like this. The law offices of Virgil Penn sat in a quiet brick building with a brass nameplate no one polished often. But it wasn't the outside that mattered. It was what was about to happen inside. I stepped into the reception area and was immediately met with silence that felt charged, electric. Lorene and Marlon were already there. She wore a sharp gray blazer, her hair pulled back like she was running for Senate. He looked even more artificial, smiling at the receptionist, as if today were just another meeting to renegotiate a contract. Virgil greeted me without a handshake, just a look. A subtle nod. They're in the conference room, he said, voice low. Everything's set. I pushed the glass door open and stepped inside. They both turned as I entered, and for a brief moment, no one spoke. Lorene smiled, far too bright. Naomi, honey. Don't, I cut her off. My voice was even, but it echoed in the wood-paneled room. Virgil sat at the head of the table. A large steel box lay in front of him, with an ornate keyhole at its center. I walked to my chair and sat directly opposite my parents. Shall we begin? Virgil asked. No one objected. I reached into my blouse and pulled out the pendant. The key slid perfectly into place and clicked. Virgil opened the box, revealing a velvet folder with a red wax seal and the emblem of Eldon's personal legal insignia. Virgil broke the seal and began to read aloud. I, Eldon William Calloway, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this my final will and testament. I leave the entirety of my estate, comprising all financial assets, properties, shares, and holdings, to my granddaughter, Naomi Elise Calloway. The air snapped. Lorene lurched forward. That's absurd. She's a child. I'm 24, I said flatly. Marlon narrowed his eyes. There's no way this holds up. She manipulated him. Virgil didn't blink. Eldon executed this will with full mental clarity. We have documentation from his primary physician. Further, Naomi was legally emancipated at 17. All of this has been legally reviewed and audited. He handed them a file. You'll find everything you need inside. Lorene turned red, her voice shrill. This is theft! I stayed silent. Then I pulled the second folder from my bag and placed it on the table. If you want to talk about theft, I said slowly, we can talk about this. Virgil opened it and passed out copies to both of them. Marlon's eyes flicked back and forth quickly. Lorene blinked, confused, until she realized what she was holding. A 2011 asset transfer form, with her forged signature, and Eldon's too. Except Eldon never signed it willingly. Virgil spoke without raising his tone. We have witnesses ready to testify that Eldon was coerced by his daughter, your wife, Marlon, into signing documents under duress. Lorene's hands shook. You can't prove... Virgil cut in, sharper now. We can. We will, and you should pray we don't press charges. Marlon turned toward her, his face tight. You told me this was real, he hissed. I didn't think she'd find it, Lorene whispered. I stood. This isn't about money, I said. This is about legacy, about the man who raised me when you walked out. You didn't just abandon me. You tried to erase him, erase what he stood for. No one spoke. You're not grieving, I continued. You're here because you failed the first time. You came back hoping he left the door unlocked. I turned to Virgil. Are we done here? He gave a small nod. I walked toward the door, past my mother's stunned face and my father's clenched jaw. But just as my hand reached the knob, I heard Marlon mutter under his breath, Then we'll take it back. By force. I didn't flinch, but I heard it. And I knew exactly what came next. 2 days later, I opened my front door to find a plain white envelope with no return address, hand-delivered and stamped urgent. There was no knock, no buzz from the intercom, just the silent threat of something waiting to break me. I brought it inside, peeled it open with my thumb, and scanned the contents. Plaintiff, Marlon and Lorene Calloway. Defendant, Naomi Calloway. Claim, undue influence and manipulation of a mentally compromised individual. I laughed, but it wasn't humor, it was fury, sharp and rising in my throat. They're suing me, I muttered, dropping the papers on my kitchen table like they were diseased. In their warped version of events, I was some Machiavellian granddaughter who orchestrated a decade-long con to bleed a dying man dry. They had the gall to argue Eldon was not of sound mind, and that I had isolated him from his biological family. They were rewriting history to erase what they couldn't control. By the afternoon, the story had hit a local gossip site. My neighbor Julie texted me a screenshot. $45 million heiress, accused of elder exploitation, family demands justice. I didn't respond. Instead, I yanked my blinds closed and locked both bolts. Just because you expect a punch doesn't mean it hurts less when it lands. Later that day, as I stepped out for coffee, hood up, sunglasses on, I saw him. Same man, same beige windbreaker. He'd been across the street the day before. Now he was sitting at the corner table outside Perch Cafe, pretending to read a paper upside down. I paused mid-step. He looked up, made eye contact, flinched. I crossed the street straight toward him. You lost? I asked. He stood too fast, the chair screeching behind him. Who are you with? I pushed again, voice cold. He took off without another word, bolting down the sidewalk like I had a badge. I didn't chase him. I didn't need to. I had enough. That night I called Virgil. Private investigator, he confirmed. Hired through a third-party firm in Knoxville. Trace the payment. It came from your father's business account. So they're watching me now, I said. They're building a smear campaign, Virgil replied. If they can't win in court, they'll try to break you in the court of public opinion. I stared at the wall for a long moment. Let them try. Before I went to bed, I sat on the floor of my bedroom with my laptop and started a digital archive. Every voicemail from Eldon, every video of us together, his handwriting on cards, medical records, tutoring receipts, old calendars with Naomi's science fair scrawled across them. I labeled each file with care. This wasn't paranoia, it was war prep. Then I recorded something for myself. A simple video, no makeup, no filters, just me. If you're watching this, it's because I forgot who I am. So let me remind myself. I'm not that girl they left behind. I'm the woman who got back up when they expected me to disappear. I hit save. The next day, I stepped outside for air. The sun was low, casting long shadows down my street. I returned home, calmer somehow, grounded. I thought I'd finally caught my breath, but when I reached my door, I saw it. A folded piece of paper slid neatly under the threshold. No envelope, just 6 words, all in block capitals. You're not untouchable, little girl. I didn't scream, I didn't call the police. I opened my door, turned every deadbolt, and sat in the kitchen with the lights off, watching the hallway, waiting. Let them come. The next morning, I woke up on the couch with a cold cup of coffee still sitting untouched on the table. The hallway light was still on. I'd left it that way, not because I was scared, but because I wasn't willing to let them scare me. Not anymore. The note from last night sat under a paperweight now. I'd reread it 3 times, not because I doubted what it said, but because I needed to see the threat in ink. Cowards send messages in whispers and shadows. I needed to burn it into my memory. That afternoon, I opened my email and saw the flood had begun. Was Naomi groomed to inherit? Young heiress or manipulator? Granddaughter or gold digger? The headlines weren't from tabloids. They were from mainstream regional outlets. Someone was feeding them stories. Lies packaged as narratives, tailor-made to destroy my name. My phone buzzed. Virgil. Turn on the drive folder, he said without saying hello. There's something Eldon left behind for a moment like this. When I opened the shared link, I froze. It was a video file, time-stamped 6 months before Eldon died. In the frame, Grandpa sat in his leather chair. His posture was upright, his voice firm, eyes clear. I, Eldon Calloway, he said, am of sound mind and body, and this is my declaration. I have chosen to leave my estate to Naomi Calloway, not out of obligation, but because she has shown integrity, discipline, and love without condition. This is my will, and I am aware of what I'm doing. I didn't cry. I uploaded the video. Within 2 hours, it spread across every major platform. My inbox exploded. Supportive messages from former teachers, childhood friends, threats from anonymous trolls, accusations, praise, and then came the call that made my stomach drop. Naomi, Dean Andrews said through the phone, we need you to come in, today. I sat in his office with my hands folded in my lap. He clicked his pen too many times. Finally, he said it. There are concerns about the lawsuit, the media portrayal. We're reviewing your scholarship. I nodded once, no tears, no begging. I understand, I said. But you should also understand this. Everything I've been accused of is false, and the video you've no doubt seen confirms that. If this university is about values, then you need to ask yourself what yours are. He didn't respond, only said, we're postponing any decisions until this settles. You may continue attending classes, for now. For now. I was hanging by a thread. That night, I sat at my desk and built a timeline, documenting everything, every lie they told, every account I could verify, every move since the funeral. Then I clicked record on a live stream. The lighting was harsh. I didn't fix it. My name is Naomi Calloway, I began, and I'm not here to plead or perform. I'm here to protect what was entrusted to me. I laid out the facts, the video, the lawsuit, the smear campaign. I spoke without venom. I didn't need it. The truth, raw and bare, was sharp enough. This isn't revenge, I said near the end. This is defense. I was 14 when they left me. I'm not 14 anymore. Within minutes, hashtags spread. #stand with Naomi, #truth over blood. After the stream ended, I refreshed my inbox. One unread message from Marlon. Subject: You just made this a war. I sat back in my chair and cracked my knuckles. Let's go then. 3 days had passed since the live stream that changed everything. I was back at Naomi Holdings, seated in the executive conference room with my senior leadership team, analyzing post-event data. We were dissecting market reactions, client sentiment, and brand engagement. To our collective relief, most responses were overwhelmingly positive. Investors appreciated the transparency, clients praised the resolve. Internally, morale had never been higher. Then the door slammed open. Rachel, my head of security, a woman who once faced down protesters in a monsoon without blinking, walked straight in without knocking. That never happened. You need to come to the lobby, now. She didn't raise her voice, but the weight behind her words left no room for debate. Without hesitation, I pushed my chair back and followed her. The hallway echoed with the sharp strike of my heels against marble, each step loud, deliberate, unavoidable. The elevator ride was brief, silent. When the doors opened, chaos greeted us. Phones, lights, people. Right in the center of it all stood them, my parents, as if they had simply wandered in off the street for a friendly visit. Lorene wore her signature strand of pearls, paired with a cream-colored suit too immaculate to be sincere. The kind of outfit worn to impress a courtroom or manipulate a camera. Marlon, ever the showman, sported dark sunglasses inside and had his arms spread wide like some long-lost patriarch ready to host Thanksgiving. They'd come prepared to perform. Naomi, Marlon bellowed, spinning to face the nearest phones. This company was built on blood. She wouldn't have anything if it weren't for us. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. I stepped forward slowly, my posture unshaken. You abandoned me when I was 14, I said, my voice cool but firm. You forfeited any claim to my life, or anything in it. Lorene gasped, clutching her chest like a second-rate soap opera villain. Sweetheart, don't say that. We were young, lost. We made mistakes, but we are still your parents. No, I replied, cutting through her performance like glass. You were criminals. You stole from me, lied to me, sold off my childhood for drug money and cons. And if you're not out of this building in 2 minutes, I'll have security escort you out and file charges for trespassing and harassment. Marlon stepped forward, his smile gone. You're not the only Calloway left, Naomi. Don't think you can shut us out forever. A murmur swept through the crowd of employees and onlookers. Phones were now up everywhere. Someone whispered, She's live again. Good. Let them hear. I turned to the growing crowd. Let's get something clear, I said. These people, these two, didn't raise me. They abandoned me. They only came back when there was something to take. The lobby fell silent, save for the subtle hum of streaming devices. This company wasn't handed to me. I built it from the ashes they left behind. If legacy means anything, it's what we protect, not what we exploit. If you think blood entitles you to a seat at the table, then you don't understand a family. Lorene's carefully practiced expression faltered. Marlon sneered. Security stepped in, professionally but firmly ushering them toward the exit. The glass doors slid closed behind them, shutting out the past like a final punctuation mark. By the next morning, the moment had gone viral. 2.3 million views and counting. #stand with Naomi, #air with honor, #legacy over blood. By midday, the board called an emergency session. Virgil, my longest-serving advisor and a board liaison, pulled me aside beforehand. Some members are nervous, he said cautiously. They're worried about the optics, investors, media, stock volatility, standard boardroom jitters. I walked in ready. I brought with me a full packet of documentation, timestamps, videos, screenshots, a precise timeline of everything leading up to the lobby incident. I didn't just come to defend myself. I came to end the conversation. I won't apologize for telling the truth, I told them. And I will not be silenced to protect outdated notions of brand image. If silence is the price of integrity, I'd rather be loud and honest. Some board members looked uneasy. A few nodded. None objected, at least not publicly. That night, I stayed late in my office and rewrote a strategic directive that had been on my mind for months. By the next morning, we'd launched a new initiative under my foundation, Air with Honor. It was more than a campaign. It was a public-facing advocacy branch to help others who had suffered betrayal at the hands of family, especially those who'd endured abuse, financial manipulation, or legal obstruction related to inheritance or legacy rights. This was bigger than me now. There were thousands, maybe millions of people out there watching that live stream. People who had been made to feel alone, powerless, voiceless. Now they knew they weren't. As I was shutting down my laptop that evening, a new notification popped up in my inbox. It was from my legal team. Urgent. Certified mail Marlon Calloway v. Naomi Calloway filed allegations. Defamation, business obstruction, inheritance fraud. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't catch. They weren't done coming for me. And now neither was I. The courthouse steps were slick with morning drizzle. Rain clung to the stone like a whisper, just loud enough to make you cautious. Reporters huddled at the bottom of the stairs, microphones in hand, eyes scanning for a story to devour. They reminded me of seagulls, restless, opportunistic, waiting for something to drop. I didn't stop. I didn't look at them. I didn't have to. I held the leather folder against my chest with both arms, like a shield. It contained more than documents. It carried years of silence, truths buried and unspoken. The echoes of a childhood stolen and the man who gave me back a name, a home, and a future. Inside the building, everything shifted. The air was stale and still, as if time itself had paused to listen. The courtroom filled faster than expected. The gallery was packed. Faces I didn't recognize, some sympathetic, some skeptical. Whispers stirred like wind against marble, brushing the edges of wooden benches and sharp-suited egos. Across the aisle, Marlon lounged like a man on vacation. Confident, relaxed. Like he thought the whole thing was a formality, just another performance where he played the victim and walked out richer than he came in. Lorene sat beside him, all pearls and feigned fragility, dabbing at her eyes with a neatly folded handkerchief. Her tears were dry, her nerves were rehearsed. Their lawyers matched the image perfectly, expensive suits, polished shoes, expressions carved from stone. They didn't come to argue facts, they came to sell fiction. Virgil leaned toward me, voice low. Just speak the truth. That's all they didn't count on. I nodded. It wasn't comfort I needed. It was clarity, and I had it. The trial opened exactly how I imagined it would, with character assassination disguised as reasonable doubt. An estranged child returns, spends a brief amount of time with her grandfather, and suddenly she's the sole heir? Their lead attorney delivered it like a joke, raising an eyebrow and glancing toward the jury as if waiting for a laugh. What are we supposed to believe? I watched the jurors carefully. One of them scribbled a note. Another frowned. The rest kept their faces neutral. Then it was our turn. Virgil rose slowly. He didn't need theatrics. He let the facts speak for themselves. Custody rulings from 2011, showing how I'd been legally removed from my parents' care. Documentation of my emancipation, signed and stamped. Medical assessments of Eldon's mental state, each one verifying his clarity in the final year of his life. Finally, he played the video, the one Eldon recorded 6 months before he died. His voice filled the courtroom. I've thought long and hard about this, Eldon said, looking straight into the camera. Naomi's the only one I trust. She's the only one who never asked for anything except time. She never once tried to take. She gave. That's what legacy should go to. The room was utterly silent. Then it was my turn. I stood and walked slowly to the stand. My hands were steady, my voice clear. He chose me because I stayed, because I didn't walk away when things got hard. I didn't ask for his money. I only ever asked for something simple, family. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. Then they called Lorene. She walked to the stand like she was made of glass, every step measured. She clutched her handkerchief like it was proof of something real. I always loved Naomi, she said, her voice quivering just enough. I sent letters, birthday cards. I tried to visit. I wanted to be in her life, but I was pushed out. It was a masterclass in manipulation. I waited for the pause between her words to widen. Then I spoke. If you'd loved me, you wouldn't have left, I said. You don't abandon someone and then expect to be welcomed back in when there's something to gain, Love doesn't work like that. Family doesn't work like that. The air shifted again. No one moved. The judge, who had watched all of this unfold with the patience of someone used to human drama, finally leaned forward and adjusted her glasses. Case dismissed with prejudice. Miss Calloway retains all legal rights to the estate. Further claims of this nature will not be entertained. And just like that, it was over. I stepped out into the daylight. This time the rain had stopped. The clouds were beginning to break apart, and the sun cut through in pale golden rays. Reporters surged forward. Cameras clicked. Microphones thrust into my face. Miss Calloway, do you feel vindicated? Do you have a comment on the ruling? I kept walking. Some truths don't need a headline. Some victories don't need confetti. I walked down the courthouse steps, each one lighter than the last, and disappeared into the noise. That evening, I returned to my apartment and curled up on the couch with a blanket and a cup of chamomile tea. The city buzzed outside, but in my living room, there was only the soft glow of a floor lamp and the quiet hum of stillness. I opened my phone and scrolled through the flood of messages. Congratulations. Media requests. Supporters sharing their own stories. One message stood out. A DM request from an unfamiliar profile. No real name. Just a muted image of a seascape as the avatar. I tapped it open. I think we might share a father. I'm sorry about what you're going through. Alec, 28, Baltimore. My stomach sank. My heart paused. Same father. Different life. A half-sibling I never knew. A silence I hadn't expected to break. The next morning, I drove out to Eldon's grave. The groundskeeper had done his work. The grass had thickened, green and soft, and spring flowers bloomed around the headstone. I knelt down and sat cross-legged beside it, brushing a few leaves away. From inside my coat, I pulled out a folded letter, written by hand the night after the trial. I unfolded it slowly. I kept my promise, I said aloud, voice cracking a little. They came back, but I didn't fall. You built me to stand. I reached into my pocket and took out the gold key he'd left me, the one he said symbolized more than inheritance. It meant trust, continuity, a belief in something better than the past. I set the key gently on the stone, letting it rest there for a long moment, catching the morning light. Then I picked it back up and fastened it around my neck again. That night, I stared at Alec's message for a long time, fingers hovering over the screen. There was a new story waiting. This time, I typed, "Tell me your story." The hum of the copier beside my desk clicked off as I signed the last document in the stack. Just like that, it was official. The Eldon Legacy Foundation existed, legally, structurally, and spiritually. I leaned back in my chair, watching the ink dry on the paper bearing my grandfather's name, not as a benefactor or donor, but as a symbol of second chances. For the first time in a long time, the air in the office didn't feel like a battlefield. No phone calls from lawyers, no press ambushes at the elevator, no crisis to navigate. Just peace. The press launch happened on a cloudy Thursday, in the garden Eldon used to read in every Sunday. I stood at a podium that felt far too big until I looked up and saw the faces gathered, former teachers, youth counselors, volunteers, and a few teenagers whose eyes held the kind of silent fear I knew too well. This foundation isn't about me, I began, adjusting the mic. It's not about the Calloway name. It's about what we do when someone chooses to see us, not as broken, but as becoming. The applause wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the kind that stayed with you long after you stepped off the stage. Later that evening, I returned to Eldon's house, still mine, though it never felt like just property. I wandered through his study, fingers brushing over book spines, picture frames, his old globe. I don't know what made me open the bottom drawer of his file cabinet, but I did. A leather-bound notebook rested inside. Its pages were delicate with age, ink faded slightly at the edges. Toward the back, a dated entry caught my eye. I wanted to forgive Marlon. I wanted to believe he could grow. But then, Naomi brought me coffee on a day my hands were shaking and asked me what kind of cookies I liked. No agenda, no angle, just kindness. I couldn't risk her being hurt again. So I locked the gate behind me, not because I didn't love my son, but because I loved my granddaughter more. I closed the notebook slowly, pressing my palm over the cover. Not grief, not anymore. Gratitude. A few days later, I met Alec. He didn't look like Marlon, thank God. We met at a quiet cafe tucked between two art galleries downtown. He was already seated when I arrived, nervously flipping through the menu. I sat across from him, letting the silence linger just long enough to feel real. "I don't want anything from you," he said finally. "I just thought, maybe we both lost something. Maybe talking helps." "Blood made us siblings," I replied. "Let's see if honesty can make us anything else." He smiled, and for once I smiled back without hesitation. Weeks passed. The foundation held its first outreach session. I visited one of our partnered shelters that afternoon, where a young girl, barely 13 maybe, approached me shyly. "Do you think people can start over?" she asked. I knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her eyes. "I don't just think it," I said. "I know it." That night, walking into the main hallway of the Eldon Legacy Center, I passed his portrait. It hung above the entrance now, surrounded by stories we were collecting, each one written by someone who survived, rebuilt, or simply endured. I looked up at him. "They tried to define me by what they abandoned," I whispered, "but I chose to define myself by what I built." My phone buzzed. Another message from Alec. "Want to meet again next week?" I typed back, "Yeah, let's." Before I go, I want to say this. If you've ever been left behind, lied to, or made to feel small by the people who were supposed to love you first, you're not alone. I've been there, and I made it out. Not because I'm stronger than anyone else, but because I stopped waiting for closure from those who broke me and started creating it for myself. Legacy isn't about blood. It's about choice. It's about choosing kindness when cruelty taught you silence. It's about choosing to build when others tried to tear you down. And sometimes, it's about letting go of what hurt you, not to forget it, but to prove it didn't win. To anyone watching who's facing a storm, whether it's family betrayal, legal injustice, or just the pain of being misunderstood, I see you. And you're not defined by who left. You're defined by who you decide to become. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had to cut ties with someone you thought you'd never let go? Or maybe you're still holding on, wondering if they'll ever change? Let me know in the comments. What hit home for you in this story? If this video touched your heart, type 1 in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. If it didn't speak to you, I still want to know why. Drop your thoughts, and let's talk about it. And if you want more real stories that speak truth, healing, and second chances, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Because I've got more stories coming, and you deserve to hear every one of them. Thank you for being here. Really.